Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. I think we have an amazing podcast today. We have a set of scary stories from listener Jim Sweeney and a classic horror tale from the South African radio series, Beyond Midnight. Add to that a history lesson from the Smithsonian about a stump and a moment in time from February of 1880. Now, it wouldn't be an RAS podcast if we didn't start it all off with this 5-minute mystery.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by the word motive, which is defined as a reason for doing something, especially one that is hidden or not obvious. As we listen to today's story, let's keep that in mind, shall we?
In a small Mexican town just across the border, Inspector Howard Hanley sits comfortably in a side street cafe.
Inspector Hanley! Has anyone seen the inspector?
The table by the window, I think you'll find him there.
Inspector Hanley! Oh, there you are. I am so afraid I'll not find you.
Wild excitement, Pedro.
This is the Americanos in the old Manuelo place. You must come quickly.
Mr. and Mrs. Shepard, you mean? What's up? Don't tell me it's another seance.
Oh, plenty she is up. A little while ago I come in from the horses. Mr. Shepard and Mr. Cortez, they are there in the library.
And Mrs. Shepard?
She's dead. Senor Cortez, he sent me for you.
Oh, you made a fast trip, Pedro. We'll make a faster one back. Come on. Looks like we've got some excitement on our hands. Oh, Inspector Hanley. You have looked at the body? Yes, stabbed. One good blow. Been dead for about an hour, maybe more.
Oh, no, it can't be.
Mr. Shepard seems to be taking this pretty hard.
Inspector, this is a most terrible thing which has happened. I almost feel responsible myself.
I didn't do it. I couldn't have. Inspector Hanley, you've got to believe me.
Hey, what's going on here?
I will explain, Inspector. You no doubt are familiar with the fact that Mrs. Shepard was quite a believer in the supernatural.
Well, I know she had seances up here frequently.
I myself am somewhat known in the field of hypnotism. Mrs. Shepard, she asked me to come up here this afternoon to see my work.
I see.
When I arrived, she asked me to perform for her. Mr. Shepard, he do not like this stuff too much, especially when she begged him to let me hypnotize him.
Mr. Shepard fought your attempts to hypnotize him?
See, it was very difficult for me to perform. The best results come when the subject is willing.
I see. Shepard, what do you say to this?
I don't know, Inspector. I only know I was determined he wouldn't hypnotize me. I had a headache anyway, and finally I guess I must have blown up about the whole thing and left the room. I went upstairs and fell asleep. The next thing I knew...
That is not so, Inspector. He was in his hypnotic state that he killed her. 1 minute he was just standing there while I was concentrating over him, and the next minute he grabbed that knife and he stabbed her. It was then he ran out of the room and upstairs.
Are you calling the man a liar?
Not a liar, Inspector. When Mr. Shepard awoke, he may have thought that I did not hypnotize him, but regretfully enough, in this situation, I did.
Well, Mr. Shepard, it looks pretty bad.
Oh, no, I didn't do it. I couldn't.
Hold on, Shepard. I said it looks pretty bad, but not for you. I'm holding our friend Cortez here for the murder of your wife.
Why did Inspector Hanley arrest Cortez for murder? You know the clue? In a moment we'll hear, but first...
Well, that seems to be a cut-and-dried case. However, as with these mysteries, it surely does lack in motive. Also, this one tries to convolute things with paranormal seances and hypnotic suggestion, all of which fall under the title of lack of motive. Let's go back and see how the detective ties this one up.
And now, back to our story.
Cortez, you gave a very convincing story of hypnotizing Mr. Shepard and of how, while in that hypnotic state, he killed his wife, went upstairs, and then awakened, not realizing what he'd done. You're a fake, Cortez. It's obvious you don't know too much about hypnotism, or you wouldn't have given yourself away. You said quite plainly that Shepard here fought your attempts to hypnotize him. The best hypnotist in the world will tell you that you cannot hypnotize a person against his will. Come out of that trance, Cortez. You're under arrest.
He sure put everything into perspective. Now, Is hypnotic suggestion real? Yes, it is, and it is possible to do so without consent. However, it does not provide the hypnotist with any sort of control over the person. Also, it still does not provide this case with any motive. Oh well, this 5-minute mystery was brought to you by the motive, whatever it might have been. What I have to say is that we have a set of creepy stories today. Jim Sweeney from Bennington, Vermont sent us this email, which I gently edited. When I was a child, my family moved into an old house. It has 3 floors with big empty rooms and creaking floorboards. Both my parents worked, so I was often left alone when I came home from school. One afternoon, I came home and the house was impossibly dark. It just felt wrong. I called out, "Mom?" It was deathly quiet, but then I heard her sing-song voice say, "Yes," from upstairs. I called to her again as I climbed the stairs to figure out what room she was in, and again got the same, "Yes." We were redecorating at the time, and with all the plastic up and wall changes, I didn't know my way around the maze of rooms yet. However, I could tell the voice was coming from the 3rd floor in one of the far back rooms. I found the main hallway, and again, that uneasy feeling came over me. I figured that it was only natural, so I rushed forward to find my mom. I knew that her presence would calm my fears, as a mother always does. Just as I reached for the handle of the door I thought her to be behind, I heard the front door downstairs open and my mother call out, "Jimmy, are you home?" I jumped back, startled, and then started down the stairs to her. I glanced back at the door to the room. It slowly opened a crack, and for a brief moment I saw something strange standing there. I don't know what it was, but it was staring at me. As time passed in that old house, things started to happen. Items would disappear and then be found in very strange places. Lights would turn on and then off. At night, you could hear footsteps in the hallways, and voices would ring out or join conversations out of nowhere. One night at dinner, my parents told me that I was never to go into the basement alone. They said something about dangerous mold. I was older now, and I wanted to see what it was. As I approached the door, I heard a sound. It kinda sounded like a puppy, and I wanted to see the puppy. So I opened the basement door and tiptoed down the stairs just a bit. I didn't see any puppy, but then a dark shadow streaked towards me, making a growling sound. I felt a jerk from behind me as my dad yanked me out of the basement by my shirt collar and slammed the door shut. He told me to never go into the basement again. And I remember just nodding my head. Time passed and I grew up in this haunted house. My parents turned the place into a bed and breakfast and have been quite happy there. However, it's not your normal B&B. You see, they bill it as a haunted house, and the guests, well, they never seem to be disappointed, especially when the tour goes into the basement for a ghost hunt. Jim Sweeney. Oh my. It sounds to me like you could write a very successful book or even make a movie. I would love to hear some more stories from you. Thank you, Jim, for sharing this one with us and making it out alive to do it. I have to say, I'm not sure I'd be quite as calm about the whole thing. If you want to hear your story on Ron's Amazing Stories, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com and click on the Contact tab. Fill out the information, and then next thing you know, your story will be on Ron's Amazing Stories. Do it today. As promised this week, we have a scary tale. And it just so happens that it pairs quite well with the story we just heard. Now, I do want to warn parents. While this is old-time radio, it is very intense. It begins with the tagline, "Don't move the ugly green vase that sits in the parlor at the Lanceford House. Don't lift it, don't even touch it, because if you do, something in the attic won't like it." Our story comes from the South African radio series Beyond Midnight. It was a horror anthology series that ran from 1968 to 1970 on Springbok Radio. This station was operated by the South African Broadcasting Corporation, or the SABC. The story uses minimal music and sound effects, but the actor does such an incredible job that somehow you don't even realize it. Again, this story is quite intense, and if I'm being honest, sent shivers down my spine. It is called The Lanceford House and first aired in Africa on January 24th, 1969.
I came into possession of the Lanceford House through the accident of my uncle's death. My inheritance from him enabled me to buy it, for it was the isolated kind of dwelling I'd been looking for in order to finish a novel I was working on. I've always found it impossible to create anything worthwhile in the noise of the city. The house was fully furnished, but since it had been empty for many years, it was extremely dusty, and I spent my first day cleaning away the dust in the few rooms I intended to use. Lanceford House. I remember the place as if it were only yesterday I discovered the green vase, learnt its terrible secret, and passed so nearly through the veil that separates sanity and the madness that lies beyond midnight.
Biotex, the new soap and pre-wash powder, presents Beyond Midnight by Michael McKay.
Lanceford House. The agent hadn't been enthusiastic. I got the impression that he didn't much care whether he sold me the place or not.
There's nothing extraordinary about Lanceford House, Mr. Royd. It's very big, of course, but then they built them big in those days. If it wasn't so strongly built, it would have fallen to pieces years ago. A house needs to be cared for. Leave it empty.
Well, it's what I'm looking for. Nicely back from the road, surrounded by trees.
A lot of trees, yes.
Fields, pastures. It's hard to find somewhere without any close neighbors these days.
Oh, I can show you others. There's a place in,
Mr. Feltham, I want to buy Lanceford.
You do?
I do.
Well, then. Nothing else, I suppose.
No.
Right, sir. You, write books, you say?
I write books, yes. When can I take possession?
Today.
Oh, marvelous. I'm halfway through a book at the moment, you see. I've been stuck for weeks. I need peace now. Quiet. No. For 5 days after moving in, I worked from 5 in the morning right through the day until it was dark. The book progressed beautifully. I was even thinking of who the film rights should go to when I hit another dull patch. Nothing. I destroyed a few thousand words and left the typewriter until a possible return of inspiration. I was fairly satisfied, though, and it was with a lot of pleasure that I began to examine more carefully the house I'd so quickly and perhaps rashly bought. In most ways, it was typical of the houses erected in the country 100 years ago. It needed a lot of money spent on it before it would assume the splendor it deserved, but I needed only 1 or 2 rooms. One thing puzzled me. The little attic. Locked. ahead, then. And of course, I want to know what's in there now. Give that agent a ring. Treasure? Fat chance. Wonder why this door should be locked when all the others are open. I started to rearrange the kitchen the next day. I knew instinctively that no good would come of hammering the typewriter. The place was in a terrible state. I cleaned out some cupboards, did a bit of inexpert scrubbing, and then, while I was reaching up to hook a number of miscellaneous objects out of a sort of old-fashioned tall boy thing in a corner, I accidentally knocked off a shelf a canister. It opened, and a piece of folded paper fell out. An old piece of paper, brown with age, badly worn and tattered. There was writing on the paper. It was barely legible. The ink had faded badly, and large sections of the script had been worn or torn away. It was dated over 30 years before, and all that remained of the entire first paragraph beneath the date was Stephen Lanceford, a young man of 25. And that was all the first paragraph said. Thereafter occurred a puzzling sequence of half lines, sentences, paragraphs, in this order. To have him tutored in the arts, particularly gifted in pottery making. Stephen developed a great fondness for his tutor, and under his guidance did the only constructive work of his life. A crude, ugly vase, bilious green in color. Stephen was proud of it. Kept it on the center of a small table in the living room. Dismissed. Stephen raged for days, and there began a subtle deterioration of a character which had always heretofore been shy and retiring. Ugly metamorphosis, kind of madness in the course of which he would never allow his vase to be moved. Made his mother promise that it would never be moved under pain of dire punishment, but left to stand where he had put it. Some strange elemental bond seemed to have developed between the young man and his creation. After Stephen's death, Mrs. Lanceford was unable to bear the thought of... Instead, she had the casket sealed, obtained permission from the authorities, and in the attic. Thereafter, rigid adherence to her promise. Stipulation in her will adjuring all future occupants not to move the vase. When a relative came to live in the house after her death, body torn, rent apart, found beside the table. I will, I know, eventually lift the vase. And that's all. I couldn't make a lot of sense out of it, I must admit. I tried to read, to make out the bits that had faded, but it wasn't possible. On the end of the whole thing was a signature. Matthew Hargrove. Suddenly I remembered seeing, in the living room, which I hadn't had time to clean, a small table pushed over against the wall with a cloth covering an object of some bulk. That would be it, all right. See what they meant in their letter thing. It is crude. Ugly as sin. Matthew Hargrove. Wonder who he was. Or is. There was nothing in Uncle's papers about anyone of that name. Matthew Hargrove.
Hargrove. Matthew Hargrove. Are you the young chap that bought the Lanceford place?
Yes, I expect to be a regular customer here.
People don't talk much about what happened to that Hargrove man. Used to be Mrs. Lanceford's lawyer. Wrote up the old woman's will. Oh, queer that was. All about some vase thing her son made. Funny things went on after she died, you see. You want anything more than the razor blades, do you?
What funny things?
Well, there was Reuben Yates. That was her cousin. Came down when she got sick and stayed. You're from the town, aren't you? You don't get to hear about things like we do down here in the country, you see.
What happened to Reuben Yates?
Reuben Yates? Ah, well, they found him next to that table with the vase on it. Said he was torn apart.
I see. And where does Matthew Hargrove come in?
Oh, right after. He was the next one to move into the house. And he was the next one found by the table, too. Same as Reuben Yates. People say that they that saw him got sick in their stomachs for weeks afterwards.
And then?
No more. Nobody else moved into that house. From then till the day you moved in, nobody. Nobody at all.
The inference behind Mrs. Calkins, the lady in the village shop's words, added to those in the fragmented letter, began to take a kind of nagging form in my thoughts. For the rest of that day, I tried to write. I couldn't. No city noises. But there was another distraction now. The vase, and the strange story behind it. The living room drew me, and I went in. I looked at the ugly thing for a long, long time, and then I stretched out my hand to lift it. Suddenly I remembered Reuben Yates and Matthew Hargrove. Come on, Royd. Stop being... But even so, I only lifted the thing a quarter of an inch from the little table. It was about 10 seconds later that I heard it. I replaced the vase. How can I describe it? I don't know where it came from. Somewhere in the house. Somewhere, to be sure. It reminded me of nothing I'd ever heard in the whole of my life before. Silence followed. Deep, deep silence. Then I tilted the vase again. This time the reaction was instantaneous. I went and got a brandy and sat down for a while to recover my composure. It was then that I remembered the attic. It took me a long time to summon up the courage, but I had to know. I went back and quickly slipped a penny under the vase on the table. Then I ran upstairs. I got down on my hands and knees and tried to peer through the keyhole. I couldn't see anything. As I was struggling to my feet, I felt a thin current of air cross my face. A short, warm draft of air. But there was no attic window through which the wind could enter, and the air that struck my face was warm. I bent down again, and this time I put my ear to the keyhole. I felt it again, coming out of the keyhole. Not a draft. Not a draft at all. What I felt was breathing.
Airwick handy in your home. Airwick is the modern air freshener. It doesn't just mask smells with heavy scent, it actually knocks them right out of the air. Airwick keeps the home sweet with a country fresh atmosphere in every room. Put Airwick on your shopping list. It comes in economical bottle or up-to-the-minute aerosol. Get Airwick.
Soak, that's all you have to do. Soak, just for an hour or two you'll find this soap as good as new when you use new Biotech.
Amazing new Biotech soap stubborn stains away.
Clean, everything soon will be clean, for all the world to see. Soak, stains away easily when you use new Biotech.
Get amazing new Biotech today and let soaking do the washing.
Why I did it, I don't know. Even then, something told me I was meddling in things I could never hope to understand. There was something in the house I knew then that could bathe me in the fires of purgatory forever and a day. But I came down the stairs and placed 2 more coins under the vase, tilting it further. I immediately returned to the attic door. I no longer heard mere breathing through that keyhole from the room beyond. I did not wait long. Something was trying to get out. I removed the coins again from under the vase, and it once more rested as it had done so for 30 years. All next day, the memory of that experience preyed on me. I couldn't work. I could hardly bear to be alone. The vase exercised an unholy fascination on me. I was in desperate need of company, and that's why I wrote an invitation to Edward Clayton and asked him to spend a week with me to celebrate my inheritance. He came, as I knew he would. We'd been great friends for many years, but for the first 3 days, I was loath to confide in him.
Ah, this could be splendid, Dennis. This room, light, airy. Have to do something with those curtains, of course, but... hello, what's this?
For the love of heaven, don't touch that vase.
Oh, why not? What's this?
Sit down. I'll tell you.
Sit down. I told him everything that had happened since I took possession of the house, but he made little effort to conceal his skepticism.
Oh, Dennis. Come on, man. I mean,
you must take me seriously.
But granting that what you say is true, what the devil does it mean?
I don't know. You read the letter?
Hmm? Oh, yes. It just read it in front of you, didn't I?
Edward, promise me you will not touch that vase.
But that put me in the position of subscribing to your fears.
Please.
All right, promise. Scout's honor. I need beer. Lots of cold beer. Come on, the ghost isn't walking at the moment.
He promised. Oh, yes. But he promised without believing. And perhaps the very promise he made was a challenge. Next day, he seemed unable to concentrate. Twice when I spoke to him, he didn't hear me. He was in a kind of dream, thinking of something else. I knew what it was. I did everything I could to divert his attention. I read him part of my novel, which had come to a full stop. He listened and made some favorable comments. For a while. But I knew I was not holding his attention. He kept wandering about the house, and inevitably his journeying took him by or into the room. where the table and the vase upon it had lived for the past 30 years. The thing seems to fascinate you. The vase.
Vase? Oh, the vase.
You can't take your eyes off it. I've been watching you.
Oh, at first, well, I thought it was a fairy story.
And now?
Well, now I'm not so sure. I wonder.
Don't. Some malignance is associated with that thing. Some bond ties it to something in the attic.
What do you...
I mean something linked with it in space or time.
Or in the attic.
Or in the attic, yes.
If you think so, why haven't you been up there to see?
It's locked.
Well,
I couldn't bring myself to break in.
There's no time like the present, then, is there? You game?
I didn't know.
Well, make up your mind. You can't just live here with half-truths. You either find out there's something nasty and horrible around, in which case you move out. Or you find out it's all a silly mistake. Lay the ghost and continue writing your book in peace. And incidentally, I think your book will be very splendid.
Thank you.
So, let's go and see what's up in the attic. Bring the lamp.
All right.
Got the lamp?
Yes.
Coat off, I think. Danger. Men at work. Yep.
Our lamplight flooded the room. In the middle of the attic floor stood a coffin. Just a coffin. Nothing else. Not even a rug was to be seen in that gabled room. The coffin was festooned with spiders' webs, as if it had not been disturbed for decades.
Sealed. I take it that this is Stephen Lanceford's coffin. His mother had him put here.
I imagine so. Yes. The vase is the one he made in the letter. Remember?
Yes, exactly. Well, yes, I know what you're thinking. It doesn't hold water, Dennis, and you ought to be the first to see it.
Nothing about this thing holds water, as you put it.
Suppose it isn't a bad place to rest. If you were dead, I mean, dry at least. Better than 6 feet under, eh? Don't stare at it like that. Nothing's going to rise up out of it, Dennis.
Isn't it?
No. Ghoulish lot the Lanceford there.
Let's get out of here.
Okay. What are you going to do about this room, attic?
I'm going to seal it. Nail it up.
I need one. This moaning noise you talked about.
Yes?
Care to demonstrate?
All right. Listen.
I'm all ears.
Slowly, I lifted the green vase, half an inch off the table. I replaced the vase. Interesting. All right. Now you've heard. Let's have that drink, and then I think I'm ready for bed. Books come to a dead stop at the moment. Do you know what? If nothing happens with the book I need, by the time you leave, I'll come back to town for a while. If and when I sell my book, if it's published and makes money, maybe I'll have this place. What are you doing? Put the vase down! I moved towards him, whereupon he lifted the vase high above his head and backed away, grinning madly. Then we heard the attic door beaten down. Then the color drained from Edward Clayton's face.
Take the vase, Dennis! My God! My God!
He dropped the vase, it smashed into 100 pieces, and then the thing was at the door, and the door opened, and it was in the room.
Dennis!
I leapt towards the window, and before I crashed through the glass, I half-turned. Something had entered that room beyond my range of sight, for Edward was hanging limply aloft in mid-air. Here. Thanks. So, that's about it then, eh? That's it. Poor Edward. Poor Edward.
No, steady on. The doctor said you've not to get out of bed. You've had a shock.
Poor Edward. I told him. I did, Sergeant.
Yes. Well, the folks from Burnstrom went up there, and there he was. Just like the others. It was a thing neither you nor any other man could have done. There's one more thing, sir, I'm afraid to have to tell you. They took matters into their own hands. They burned down your house. Took your stuff out first and set fire to the house.
Yes, it was just as well. I couldn't have gone back there.
Funny thing, though. You said the vase was smashed on the floor.
It was.
When we found it, all the broken pieces were piled together, as neat as you please. Smack in the middle of the table.
How intense was that? I really did worry some about playing it, but it was so good that I couldn't help myself. I don't know who acted in that one, but he was amazing. My research suggested that it was written by Dennis Roit, who could possibly be a Wisconsin writer from the University of Wisconsin, but I cannot prove it. This I do know. That was a creepy tale that will stick with me for some time, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And now, this.
It seems as though the whole country is talking about the great 1954. Listen to what C.W. DeCandre, a resort owner in Daytona, Florida, one of more than 420,000 delighted new Ford owners, has to say about Ford station wagons.
Our resort has had nothing but Ford station wagons, and I'm convinced that the new 50 model is the best of all. It has the real passenger car comfort, which is important to our guests, and when you take out the rear seats, you have the perfect hauling vehicle. Tell you something else. I think the 50 Ford station wagon has a certain air about it that the others just can't match. It's so easy to keep new looking, too. Just a wash now and then, and you'd think we'd bought a new one.
Ford dealers hear praise like this every day. And they want you to get that fine Ford feel, too. They want you to stop in and test drive the Ford for 50. And while you're there, get the facts on Ford economy. You'll discover the new Ford is low in initial cost, high in resale value, thrifty on gas and oil, and inexpensive to maintain. Yes, first and last. The new Ford is designed to save you money. See it. Test drive it tomorrow.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a story taken from the archives of the Smithsonian. The reading is called An African American Waiter and the Bullet-Shredded Spotsylvania Stump. It was taken from an article written by museum fellow Jesse Gant on May 12, 2014. It has been abridged by me to fit time requirements. You can find the full article at americanhistory.si.edu. On May 12, 1864, the combined fire of the Union and Confederate guns near the Bloody Angle at the Battle of Spotsylvania managed to annihilate a tree, leaving a bullet-riddled stump. Many have spoken on the stump's significance as a symbol of the war's carnage. What most commentators have neglected to point out, however, is that without the help of an anonymous tip from an African American waiter, the stump's story might never have been told. A trip back to antebellum Virginia is probably the best place to begin the stump's story. Before the Civil War, this tree was simply one of thousands that stood in the plantations, fields, and farmyards west of Fredericksburg, Virginia. When Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party won their resounding victory in the 1860s election, Virginia and other slaveholding states of the South decided to secede from the Union. The Civil War that followed brought the tree and the region's workers into a collision course with history. The contending armies sought North Virginia's trees for a variety of reasons, including fuel, shelter, transportation, and of course, for the construction of earthworks. The Union Army often used escaped and unpaid African American workers in its wartime camps. Even harsher Confederate policies mandated that enslaved African Americans work on the Confederated Army's behalf. But until the horrendous fighting at the Bloody Angle, this particular tree managed to survive unscathed. A year to the month after it fell in a hail of gunfire, and with the 13th Amendment ending slavery, Union troops were marching back to Washington. A group of soldiers under the command of General Nelson A. Miles stopped at the Spotsylvania battlefield to tour the grounds and to reminisce about the fight. Noticing that the now famous stump of the old oak had been removed, the soldiers went to a nearby hotel, the Spotswood Inn, and asked locals if they knew anything about its location. The owner of the hotel pretended he had no idea of its whereabouts, but when the Union soldiers were about to leave, an African-American waiter told them where it might be found. He said that his boss was hiding the stump in a nearby outbuilding. The Union troops confronted the hotel owner, and when he refused to open the door, they cut it open with an axe. They found the bullet-riddled stump inside and carted it off to Washington. The man who tipped the Union soldiers off to the stump's location was never identified, but that waiter's bold action will never be forgotten. The stump, well, it went on to an illustrious post-war career. It was shipped to Washington, presented to the Secretary of War, Edwin M. Stanton, and put on display at the old War Department, where it originally stood atop a pedestal facing Pennsylvania Avenue. Years later, the stump also made an appearance at the 1876 Centennial Celebration, where President Ulysses S. Grant served as the Master of Ceremonies. It would also be featured at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893. Today, after being transferred to the Smithsonian, it remains on the third floor of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. I found this article at the Smithsonian and I just had to share it. I hope you enjoyed this historical memory. The date is February 19th, 1880, and this is A Moment in Time. We take a step back to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and its then newspaper, the Star and Sentinel. We'll take a look at some clippings from the paper that day. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have not altered the content, and I read them to you just as they were published. From page 1 of our paper, we find this article. Never get out of temper with a barber. A gentleman not long since was sitting in a barber's chair trying to read the morning paper while having his hair cut. The barber, in the meantime, was worrying him with a recital of a long story about the barber's boy and the shoemaker's daughter at the Saturday night ball. A story which was strung out until forbearance ceased to be virtuous, when the man being clipped looked up somewhat annoyed and exclaimed impatiently, "Oh, cut it short." The barber did cut it short. When the man left the chair, he was as bald as a newborn baby. He wears a stocking cap in church now and is bothered to death by small boys who hand him bills of the theater where the can-can is danced. On the same page and over to the left, we find this interesting clipping. A woman, hearing a great deal about preserving autumn leaves, put up some, but afterward told a neighbor they're not fit to eat. It's going to take you a while to get that one. And finally, this news gem from page 2. Barn burnt. On Sunday evening, February 8th, the large barn of James McCorrick between Shippensburg and Fayetteville, Franklin County, was destroyed by fire, with contents including 10 head of cattle, 2 colts, 30 sheep, 10 bushels oats, 80 bushels of corn, 10 tons of hay, and valuable farm equipment supposed to have been set on fire. That does sound pretty bad. Now, these were exact cuts from the Star and Sentinel, and they were published on February 19th, 1880. By the way, that was a Thursday. I hope you enjoyed this moment in time.
I know all you young aviation fans and followers of Captain Midnight know a lot about flying and about flying terms. You know what it means, for instance, when an aviator says he's flying right on the beam. You know he means he's flying straight for his goal, exactly on his course. But let me ask you this. Are you right on the beam yourself? Are you getting where you want to go as fast as you can? Now, I'm talking about your health, your weight, your height. Are you getting stronger and huskier every day with more pep and ginger? Are you becoming more popular with your friends? Well, here's what thousands of smart young fellas and girls are doing to keep themselves headed in the right direction. They're drinking Ovaltine regularly, every day. You see, Ovaltine brings you vitamins and minerals and other things you need to keep yourself right on the beam. Food substances you often don't get enough of in ordinary meals. So if you want to keep racing along on your course, right on the beam like a high-speed plane, you just start drinking sweet chocolate-flavored Ovaltine 2 or 3 times a day. You'll like it. You really go for its taste. You'll say it's the most delicious way in the world to get the things you need to make yourself bigger and stronger and huskier. But now, don't put it off. Get a jar of sweet chocolate-flavored Ovaltine and start drinking it right away. And say, fellas and girls, be sure to have pencil and paper ready right after tonight's adventure when we'll have another big secret squadron signal session.
History made and another podcast in the books. If all goes well, next up we will have the 20th episode of the Horror Express. The topic will be UFO stories. Can't wait for that one. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, it's so easy to do. Just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find all of the links you will need. We are on Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many other services. Pick one and do leave some feedback about the show. It really does help us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.